Oh. No, you can't have it.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Ms. McCall?
Here.
Mrs. Garrett?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Erkins?
Here.
Mr. Westergaard?
Here.
Okay, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? All right, moving forward. Entertain a motion for the approval of minutes dated October 21st, 2025.
Move to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Then on to the monthly activity and financial reports. Cody?
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for your time today. I'm very excited. I believe we're already to the final month of our fiscal year here at the end of November. Getting ready to welcome in Festival of Trees on Sunday for moving in, Wintry Market this weekend in the building. So if you're looking for Christmas shopping, a good weekend to come down to the Boise Center and do some shopping. With that, I'll be reporting the operating results through October of 2025. Couple of highlights here. Boise Center had a dark day on Halloween, so we got a chance to, there we go, there's the slides. Got a chance to dress up a little bit and have a little fun here. So here's our team. Everybody from the OxyClean guy from Grant, who's in the room here, all the way through the team, just getting dressed up and having some fun. We had a nice little Halloween, what we call Boogles and Coffins in the morning of, where we have bagels and coffee. That's probably a 10, 15-year tradition here at Boise Center on Halloween, but it's nice when we have no events going on. We can kind of do some team building, and have some fun with it. So we did that. And then just recognizing several of us in the room here from the Idaho 500 list, from TM, Dwayne, our executive chef, myself and Kristen all being recognized on the Idaho 500 Idaho Business Review list. So again, congrats to everybody. Really good company to be a part of and honored for that. As far as the monthly events for October, we continue to see a very busy fall season. We had a total of 35 events in October alone. We're sitting about 262 on the year, with 12 of those being banquets, 7 conventions, and 16 of them being meetings. Attendance really strong in October at 13,000. As you can see, it's kind of right in the middle. It wasn't quite where it was in 24, but very similar to what we forecasted for this year, just slightly behind. What I want to point to is a couple of these in particular. So Idaho Mining Conference, a local group, but a conference and convention that brings in a lot of people. In particular, they use a lot of the portion of the building. St. Luke's Leadership Conference. These are events that are hitting capacity and the ability to grow. So as we continue to look at opportunities for expansion, not only does it help on the convention side, but our local groups that bring conventions here, like Idaho Mining, Dairy West, having opportunities to continue to grow will be a good solution as the board continues to look at those opportunities. I had a little bit of a change from the survey system we use. They changed the way that this looked, so I had to change the way the slide looked because they just got into the system and it was no longer how it used to report off of it. So they have a new little system here that basically just shows each of the scores, the percentages, and the number of responses under each. Is just presented in a different way. Same information. We have a total of 105 responses, so that's up 8 from the prior month. Again, sitting at 96 of those being 91% of them being 5-star ratings on the overall guest experience. So we're averaging a 4.9 overall rating with a goal of a 4.8. So I'm excited to be able to go into the last month with that rating and being where we're at. As far as market strategy on the sales side, and you get a chance to hear from the sales marketing communications group today. Just again, hitting all of their goals. I want to congratulate the sales team on a really, really great year. As we continue to look at leads not being the #1 driver for a metric, but really future booked revenue, future booked economic impact, and future booked room nights. All of those are at 100% of their goal at this point in the year. So the team has achieved their main 3 goals. We're excited about Smart Meetings, which is a 3-day national show coming in for April of 2026. That's going to bring 60 planners, 60 suppliers, a lot of partnerships involved in that as far as local hoteliers and ourselves. When I was at IMEX, I got a chance to meet several folks from Smart Meetings that are very excited to be coming to Boise. But this is going to really be a great opportunity for Boise to show itself to a lot of different planners during that event. And then as we look at future room nights ahead on pace compared to the prior year. So again, 26 is looking really strong. We're about 20% ahead compared to prior year and 68% ahead of 2027 where we were when looking ahead 2 years. So again, really strong numbers and congratulations to the sales team for those metrics. These are just the graphs that show what I just spoke about. And again, the team is hitting all of their metrics ahead of time on 100% of their goals on future booked economic impact, revenue, and room nights. So very, very exciting year on that side. Operational updates. Operations had a very, very busy month, so we just tallied the total number of chairs that they set. It was 23,425 chairs, over 4,000 tables in October alone. That means they touched every one of those twice. So they set the tables, but they also picked them up. So about 46,000 chairs moved, 8,000 tables set. 2 overnight resets required for operations. We're seeing that more and more as we go into the future years. Those overnight turns to be able to get the building's utilization up and flip the rooms from a late night event into an early day the next day. And then on Halloween, the team did some team building and operations. So after we got dressed up, did our boobles and coffins, they did some team building and training from the operations side. Nice little photo there. On the food and beverage side, again, the largest events that we hosted in October, Full Circle Health, about 712 people. Idaho Mining, again, 700 people. Right size of event for, I think, a convention center of our size, but as they continue to grow, having that ability to, what I've always said, meet them, feed them, and greet them, is continuing to be something that we'll need to pay attention to and get creative with groups like that. So I just want to make sure we're continuing to highlight that. Food and beverage had over $790,000 in our total revenues. So it was a really great food and beverage month. The reason I put Idaho Top Projects up there was an award that we won after we expanded in Boise Center East. So I look at that as a potential. Hopefully we can earn that again someday as we look at future projects. As far as the operating revenues go, really, really strong overall month of a $1.3 million month, but not quite where we were in 2024. So you'll notice 2024 numbers were an anomaly in September and October by how much revenue had been generated from those 2 months. But again, pacing ahead of 23 where we were at and ahead of 24. So probably a little bit of a normalization happening there. We continue to see where budget revenues are about 10 million for the operating side, and we're sitting at 10.3, so just above, about 3% above budget from what's been forecasted for the year. So proud of that. That was mostly all in 1 month, in all honesty. This last month, we outperformed budget by about 300,000. So catching up to where it was forecasted. We continue to see margins, which dipped down into the 16% all the way back in July when we had a real slow July. Those are continuing to improve. We're sitting at 18.3, and I've got my fingers crossed that November will kick out a really strong month. What I have noted to the Madam Chair is some of that I'm kind of just making sure that those numbers are going to put us to that 20% goal. As I continue to get very analytical on the numbers since they're wrapping up on year end, we're going to see a lot of expenses associated to Festival of Trees for November, but we're not going to see those revenues until December. So that is something there's to pay attention to. I still think we're going to, with the holiday parties, the amount of revenues we're going to see should hit that 20%. But if it is shy, I believe that's probably going to be one of the impacts of us coming in under would be the amount of expenses that we'll see from that. Now, what that will do, will start us out very strongly in December of next year with additional revenues that don't have those expenses associated with them right out the gate. And I've kind of forecasted for that as well for budget year. Economic impact continues to be a really, really strong year. While last year was a really great operating revenue year, this year is pacing to very similarly in economic impact. So again, the types of events really drive that. Number of people that come through the building really drive that. But the prior month, we were sitting at 4.9 million for October in economic impact. And then actual year to date sitting at 47.4. What I tend to do is tend to look at where we were at, knowing that we won't have festival. This is a $3.9 million year last year with November. If you add that to the current number, you're sitting at that 50.8 goal, pretty much very closely to that. So I anticipate we're going to hit that. We actually do have more holiday parties this year as well. So to my point about the additional revenues that we're going to see in December, we should see that pretty much hit right on mark. As far as district updates, just a couple things that I'm working on behind the scenes for the district side. We're going to be selecting a facilitator for the strategic plan. We're down to the final 2. I met with Kristen, just asking some qualifying questions about kind of as we head into potential expansion, somebody that's got a background in that kind of strategic planning and identifying who the best individual will be to work on that. I anticipate that process starting at the end of the month or very early into December. Hopefully we're having it wrapped up by January was what the expectation was that I set with the strategic planner. We are wrapping fiscal year up at the end of this month. We're going to begin our audit process in February. So again, fiscal year is a very busy time for the finance team. They are doing an awesome job this year of really even sending out a proactive notices to any of our vendors to really get invoices in as soon as possible and wrap up fiscal year end as soon as possible for the board, because we do have quick turnarounds when you have holidays and things like that on the 3rd week, in particular, like we do in November and December, we have to move those board meetings up a little bit. And so it does put a little bit of a constraint on the finance team to get financials wrapped up. Finalized executive director's annual goals and evaluation will take place in December. So we will have an executive session on the agenda for that. I believe Kristen will be not at this meeting. So I think Chase will take over as the vice chair.
I'll be on virtually, but
Yeah,
it's just
virtually,
better to
yeah,
have
just the-
somebody
yeah.
run it who's here.
Sing the gavel?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Enjoying that. And again, as we tend to look at lodging revenues here, the total here, 21.3 in, I should say October, so I don't know how we missed that one again, but October that is the correct number. 21 million sitting there at 21.2 in October for lodging room revenues. And then on the lodging room demand side, very similar, but what you'll start seeing when you look at these is that 24 was that anomaly. We talked about kind of the end of that compression, but when you start to look at these and you take out 24, they're pacing very similarly to each other as far as a pretty good uptick, minus a couple of months having some other activity, things like that. But I tend to look at when I see like September here being a little bit higher and October being a little bit lower, coming off a strong August in particular. You got a lot of activity from all the soccer tournaments late, and some of those tax revenues, at least what I've understood from the Idaho State Tax Commission, sometimes come in a little bit later too. As far as lodging rooms and occupancies, make sure I show you these because I think it's really important as we take a look at these and kind of separate out. Back up here, I went forward. Thank you, Mary Michael. So when we just take a look at occupancy kind of by itself here, you're looking at a very, very similar number overall from year over year. 25, looking at 72.2. 24 was really strong at 74.7 for October. Going back to 23, it's looking very similar to that 2023. So again, similar numbers happening on the average daily rate side when I highlight those. And what we're noticing from that side is continuing to see 24 being a little bit higher, but 25 being higher than 23. So kind of similar as what you're seeing in a lot of that data across the board. And then I'll be updating this one for end of year. So as we get to this end of year, I did pace it and look at it. It's actually slightly ahead of what my forecast was, but very, very close. But ADRs will finish at a little over 150. And then occupancies would be pretty close to that, maybe slightly under is where I'm looking at once we get November in. So those were pretty good forecasts. And then I'll be forecasting with next year as well. Inside the budget, there is forecast numbers there on the tax revenues coming in. I will hand it off. Unless you guys have any questions, I'll hand it over to finance.
Just one clarifying question about since you brought up the December meeting. Have you decided on the date for
Yes,
that?
it did. The 23rd, we're going to hold to the 23rd because that's the date that everybody had originally said it would work. And as I sent out, there were other alternative options. We could not get to where more than 3, which we would have had a quorum, but we could actually have more people on the 23rd than we would have if we would have moved it. So I apologize. It'll be that close to Christmas Eve and Christmas, but we'll have some fun together and close out the annual year here together on the 23rd.
No worries on my end there. Thanks for clarifying.
I will be holding you to the fun part of that though.
Okay. We'll do something.
Claim.
Good, good. Well, good afternoon. These are the operating results through October for the district. And Boise Center, as Cody went over the revenues, year-to-date total is 10.4 million. Expenses, a little over 16, well, close to 17. Right now, the Boise Center is outperforming the budget by $1.4 million, so looking really good. The district with revenues year-to-date, 12.2 million, expenses at 343,000. It is outperforming the budget by 872,000. I love this little slide in here because it really doesn't mean much right now, but these are the what makes up the revenues of the Boise Center. And as I said, we'll go over those for the district, starting with new slides at the beginning of the year. Hotel tax collections for October, the collections came in at 1.13. And the revenues forecasted for hotel tax, we had budgeted for 11.9 and we just hit it. So congratulations, great forecasting.
With that, so I want to clarify that with the
Yeah.
additional month coming next month at what we have forecasted.
We will hit it.
It'll hit that 11,998, so we'll be slightly ahead.
Transfers for this month, we did wind up transferring $1 million from the district to the center. We had, I don't have those numbers, 158,000 for capital projects, and $700,000 for operating, and then the usual $140,000 for the east lease payment that we have. Fiscal year, there's approximately $360,000 in capital projects that are going to be moved from this year to December. There were two large projects that I believe Cody had shared with the finance committee. We were all in there, so.
And we're actually outperforming that. So the capital, we're under the capital budget because we had a couple things that we moved. But we also, beyond that, had some contingency of about 60,000 beyond that as well. So we came under even after moving those as well.
We have Brandon and Rhett here with Clearwater Advisors, so you get an update from them. They're on the agenda. District cash position, as we sit right now, there's a little over 37 million. With the restricted funds and the stabilization funds that the board has previously set, the availability for projects is a little over 31 million. Any questions? All right.
Good budgeting. Things are coming right on.
We did aim for closer to this year. So if you guys are seeing a very close to accurate budget,
Any other questions?
one more highlight just for the board's awareness. I know Mary Michael will send this out, but we did update the future of the district part of the website that we've talked about as we came out of our feasibility study and added that information. But there's been a couple tweaks made to just the flow, the look. So we'll be sending that out to the board to take a look at it. But I want to thank MM for her efforts in getting that part updated as well.
Any other questions? Okay, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, we've got several guests here today. Guess Sullivan Reberger, you're up.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I thought I'd go over a real quick rundown of everything we're looking forward to in the legislature. We're starting to get budget figures in. Everybody's starting to get a read on what this session's going to look like. And it's not very rosy. So Governor will deliver state of the state on the 12th of January. It's it'll be an election year. So there's gonna be a heightened awareness of all the politics that go on in an election year. Major focus this session is gonna be the budget. Right now, the budget projections through 2/26, which goes into July 30th of next year, they're projecting a $200 million shortfall. That's just this year. It could actually be more as they haven't got, they don't know what those revenue pictures are going to look like as we move into the fall and into the winter. I was down in southern Idaho today, and those ag commodity folks are not doing well. That's going to have a big impact. Potatoes, corn, dairy, all of their way down. So they're saying that, what the budget picture said, right now it's 200, but we could see a downturn in that. Now, we had legislators at the same meeting and said, oh no, it's going to be just fine. They think there's going to be a $326 million surplus at the end of the session because they all projected revenue forecasts way higher than they thought they were going to be. And they're still living by those forecasts.
So is that a $500 million variance? I mean,
Yes, that's a $500 million. Yeah, just doing the math real quick.
How much is in the rainy day fund?
$1 billion. And I'll get to that, Jim, because that's going to be a very significant part of what we're dealing with here. So anyway, as we go into that, we have that $200 million. The budget director says we're going to be $200 million in the red by at the end of FY26 at least. And I believe it could even be more because, again, I just don't see the commodity prices bouncing up as we move through the winter. That's going to have impact on taxes. Legislature projects too high. I think the governor's going to come in right now. We have a 3% general fund cut. I think in the next month, you're going to see him go to 6%. So we'll have those cuts coming in. But weak income taxes, I meant, balance the budget. The one big beautiful bill that's coming to Trump, push that back down on the states. That's going to cost the states. They're saying right now, 170 to 230, but they say that's upwards of 230 million. So there's 230 more you lob onto it. We have $108 million shortfall in behavioral health. the budget, the state insurance budget, the Stearns plan for, they added public schools into that. That's $138 million increase. We have 20 out of corrections, 50 in launch, $80 million in a new tax plan that they want to bring out. Medicaid. We haven't touched Medicaid yet. And that's a 70-30 split with the feds. But the 30%, they say that what, upwards of like, they're talking 140. But I think it's going to be more because people are going to start falling on it as we go into, I think we're heading into a slight recession, frankly. Not a downturn in the economy, let's call it that. So we'll get through this year, I think. We have that $1 billion, Jim, but they're going to have to look really hard at fiscal 2027 because the budget director told me this morning that she believes it's going to be $1 billion shortfall. $1 billion in a $5.9 billion budget. And the governor said that of the 5.9 million, we're not touching education, which is 50% of the budget. So that's a basically $3 million budget. They're going to have to find $1 million in cuts. And everybody's going to shrug their shoulders on that, kind of figure out how to do that. That coupled on top of it's election year. It's going to be election year, and they want to get out of here quick because the end of the primary is May 7th. So they're going to have 5 weeks from the time they get out of here at the end of March, April 1st. They're going to have 5 weeks to basically, in most of the districts of Idaho, the primary is the election. I mean, and that's, everybody looks at it as, yes, November is the general election, but the primary in most districts is where things get decided. So they're going to want to get the heck out of here. They got to raise a bunch of money. They're not raising a lot of money right now. They can't raise it during the legislative session. So that April to May 7th is going to be really, really difficult. You're going to see a bunch of legislators trying to push to get out of it real early. So whatever cuts come up, they're like, okay, we're going to do the cuts. We're going to go home. What we don't get to, we're going to have the rainy day fund pick up. I think the rainy day fund is going to pick up most of that 200 million this year. So that leaves 800 million. So they go into the next session, but they're going to burn through that money. I don't see any way they can get around it. That in what prospect, again, revenue projections too high. Tax cut was supposed to be the governor proposed $100 million tax cut. Mike Moyle, Speaker of the House, threw a 451 on the table thinking, okay, they'll cut it. He thought that Senate was going to cut that down to 250. Well, they just passed it. So you have that huge gap, 50 minutes. That's an expense in the real world. I mean, it sounds like a tax, but that's a $500 million out of the budget right there. So
On top of 350 million the year before.
Yeah, I mean, so you start doing the math and it's going to get really dire real quick. The difficulty I see in it, one is there are 4 members of the House that were here the last time we had to cut government. So we have a brand new legislature that's never cut government. And I don't think they understand what that all means. I really don't. That's going to be very difficult for them to kind of transform themselves into budget cutters. Now, there'll be that hard right group of the legislature say, oh, fine, we cut it down to 0 and go home. But there still have government services that need to be performed. And so there's going to be that rift going on. Right now, we're starting to see there's some retirements, not very many. There's only 4 or 5 in the House right now. There may be more, but we're not seeing a lot of change. I'm kind of surprised by it. I thought I'd see more change in the makeup of the legislature the next session, but I don't think we're going to see that. At the constitutional level, the 5 constitutional elected officers, no primary challenges yet. There's a challenge to the governor on the Democratic side, but Superintendent of Public Instruction, Secretary of State, Treasurer, they're not challenged yet. And we're almost into December. And for those people that have to get out and run at a statewide, that usually that's going to cost them $1 million. And I just don't see how anybody jumps into that and kind of gets up to speed on that. Their name ID alone is going to cost them that much. And especially running against an incumbent. So it's gonna be kind of a topsy-turvy 2026. I mean, with the election year kind of breathing down on them. This Trump conformity thing is gonna be very interesting. I mean, all of a sudden, President Trump sends this down and they all love Donald Trump, but they're like, wait a minute, this is gonna cost us X. I heard yesterday, somebody said, we might agree with conformity. And I've had a discussion with the governor and he said, well, I'm gonna agree with it. No, hey, if it's the depreciation schedules, he goes, in this climate, those ag businesses, they're gonna want that. He goes, hey, they voted for it, that's what you get. So he goes, I'll let Mike Moyle tell President Trump that he doesn't want it. That was his quote to me. So, I guess to put it very concisely, it's gonna be all about the budget. It's gonna be all about cuts. And at the end of the day, they're gonna reach into that rainy day fund and pull it out for this year. But as they start looking into next year, they're gonna have to make some really draconian cuts, I think, to be able to meet the constitutional mandate that they have. Again, Medicaid's gonna capitalize on the discussion. That'll be a huge, it'll overlay this along with the conformity issue. We're gonna see some movement on local option taxes. No, I don't think any of that's gonna pass, not certainly in an election year, but we'll see some rumblings about it. The $1 billion rural health transfer.
Just along those lines, like last year, the bill that wanted to wrap the different taxing districts like auditorium into, and just let communities go with the local option, is that gonna come back up?
It will likely come back up. That was the bill run by Representative Raybold. But the speaker is a pretty staunch opponent to local option taxes. So the likelihood that he lets a bill like that get through his chamber is unlikely. But I think discussions will continue because counties are looking to diversify their revenue sources so that they don't have to rely so heavily on property taxes, because that's, the number one issue that they hear from their constituents.
And just a little inside baseball, Mike Moyle doesn't necessarily get along with Britt Raybold very well. So he'll take great pride in dumping that thing all over the place. That's what I think. Just a guess. Rural Health Transformation Program pushed down from the states. Each state gets upwards of $2 billion to do rural health. They've submitted all that stuff to Washington CMS. They have to okay the programs. That money is going to be pushed down into the local, into the rural areas. That's going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to work yet. I've yet to see how they're going to push all that money down into rural health. And I don't know. I think everybody, we talked to the Idaho Hospital Association. No one's really quite sure how that's all going to be able to take place.
Yeah, it's going to go out through a grant process, but the legislature has to give the Department of Health and Welfare receipt and spending authority for those funds coming from the feds. And that's a question right now is, well, will the legislature give the department the authority to spend it? And if they do, what strings are they going to attach to it? And so we'll probably see some language put into budgets restricting what those funds can be used for.
And you're hearing a lot of hype about the DOJ committee meeting and what they're going to cut. Well, the DOJ committee is going to go in there and do, I think, kind of hand holding things. They'll get some old rules and regulations and cut those out. But I don't think they're going to have much muscle or impact. And I think it's a great thing. They're all going to put it down on their campaign flyers. And that's what you're going to see this year. You're going to see a lot of people talking about issues that aren't going to go anywhere. We're going to have a boatload of bills introduced this year that aren't going to go anywhere because they want to take that bill number, go back to their constituents and say, look, I introduced this bill that did this, this, and this. And so there's going to be a lot of just political gamesmanship just so they can prepare themselves for that election cycle. DEI debates, we'll see some of the DEI social issue stuff coming up because, again, it's an election year. I see at some point, you're going to have the governor pitted against the Speaker of the House on tax cut. Speaker Moyle wants to cut $80 million more out of the budget. And I'm even hearing that from some of the folks in the legislature saying, we did enough last year. but he's gonna take a swing at it. Again, if it doesn't pass, he's gonna go back to his district and say, I tried to get an $80 million tax cut. I'm not sure yet how that's starting to play. What I'm beginning to feel, if people are saying, have we cut too much in taxes? I mean, if we have these budget shortfalls, shouldn't we have cut less and saved some of the money? Which makes logical sense, but then, of course, I use logic and the legislature at the same sense.
I mean, there's an opportunity to roll back some of the new programs that they introduced, like the private education tax vouchers.
Yeah, the choice bill, the $50 million they've got set out there, they say that's already spent. But I think that there's gonna be, I'm no lawyer, but I think there's gonna be a court challenge on this saying.
There is.
But yeah, there's pending. I don't see how that doesn't.
I think it's us, actually.
But that,
It is.
It actually is.
but it's gonna, I mean, that's gonna cost the state how much? At the end of the day. The superintendents of public schools say that their calculations show that the school choice could cost sort of upwards of $390 million. That's what they're thinking. So I mean, you start rolling that stuff in and it's just, your eyes roll back in your head. And they're all gonna fall back on the rainy day fund. That $1 billion, that we've saved over 10 years, they're gonna burn through that really fast. And that's kind of it. It's gonna be a very, very busy year. There's gonna be a lot of movement, a lot of action, and a lot of inaction. A lot of this stuff, budget stuff's gonna take place behind closed doors. Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, a few years ago restructured the Joint Finance Committee, and they've created their own mess with that. I don't know how they're gonna overcome these kind of cuts. They say, well, we have what they call a maintenance budget. They're gonna come out with these maintenance budgets. And the maintenance budgets are just, ground level budgets. And they're gonna have to start cutting out those ground level budget. There's nothing there. Those maintenance budgets were without the increases that just come year after year in the process. We have how many hundreds of thousands of new people in the state, and there's more demands on resources. And they haven't come to grips with all that yet.
So as we look ahead at detriment to ag, detriment to healthcare, an unsustainable budget, and potentially a economic downturn, loss of jobs because of all of that. Very bright picture. And I know you're looking into a crystal ball at the moment, but as the district is looking ahead at future projects and long-term vision and strategy, potentially building and creating something, is there anything that we should be watching for in the months ahead as we're making decisions about that?
I mean, you guys always have a great planning, it runs so well that we don't want those folks messing with it because they'll screw it up. But I do worry about them saying, oh, how much money do they have sitting over here? And you have those budget surpluses and I could see someone saying, hey, why don't we go try to take some of that money?
Why don't we trade them some of that money for like an 8-acre piece of land they have over here?
Good thing you have a committee.
Now we're talking.
Yeah.
But that's what I watch about. Just what we do is we're gonna just build walls, batten down the hatches and guard against anything that they're trying to do, bad to us. I had an old friend of mine told me once, in the legislative process, when nothing bad happens, that's good. And I kind of feel that way a little bit about how we are here at GBED, is if nothing bad happens, that's good. And that's how we're just gonna kind of weather through it. But again, I think the total focus is gonna be on these budget priorities, budget dilemmas, I should say. Patty, is there anything you want to add?
I would just add too, Pat mentioned that it's, we're not going to see a ton of change in terms of legislative makeup. But something that's different about this year compared to prior years and why we've had surpluses in prior years is because there was huge amounts of money coming in from the federal government, particularly during COVID, that really boosted our economy and boosted the state's investments in infrastructure. And I think those investments are kind of first on the chopping block coming into this session. No more $200 million annual investments in roads and bridges. Distributions to the locals might, decrease as they try to find ways to cut spending. So I think that that's an area that the district could feel the impacts in. As the state
That's a
kind of
good point.
eases up on investments. in
We met
infrastructure.
a month ago with construction folks and road builders. And at that meeting, I was in, the governor just said, you guys are gonna have your work cut out for you. Because between, when you get to Medicaid, education, we start going to, transportation this year, he goes, this can be low on the totem pole. Because, education's gonna come first, and we're gonna do Medicaid. I mean, in other words, as we look at funding, you guys, so I think that the Department of Transportation is looking that hard. There's some money over there that they've furrowed away, put away over the years. They're gonna start using some of that. And but what I've told people, if you have money out there, you better obligate it very fast. Because if you don't, they're already starting to, they're looking at budgets now. There's a water budget that's $30 million for ongoing projects in the Eastern Snake Plain to put more water into the aquifer. And they're already looking at that saying, how do we pluck that $30 million out? But that's kind of that's how draconian this budget's gonna be.
Are there any rules or restrictions on using that rainy day fund? No, it's
No.
just,
No, that's wide open. They don't have any restriction on that whatsoever. I'm curious how they're gonna play that. That's gonna get very interesting on how they decide they're gonna spend that rainy day fund. And the other thing that's gonna do, it's gonna have a blaring impact on how they've managed the budget.
So Pat, there's no chance they will look at, well, any material amount of them, we're gonna look at increasing taxes?
Nope. I'm telling you, Mike, not this election year. Get ready for 227. They're gonna start finding ways, I think at some point. But there's no appetite in that body right now to do any tax increase. I mean, here we are in this situation. Mike Will's got $80 million. He wants to go find a tax.
So that's what I was wondering, when you said he was looking at additional tax cuts, so.
Go figure.
But just the fact that they're considering not conforming with the tax cuts at the federal level, I think speaks volumes, because Idaho
Yeah.
historically conforms, and
Yeah.
if they don't,
I heard that. Yes,
actually
those
speaks
are,
for itself.
and I was hearing from some senior members of the legislature yesterday. Steve Miller, the chairman of the vice chair of the committee on JFAC, was talking about, well, we may not conform with all the elements of the tax plan. And I'm like, really? Well, part of that is the depreciation schedules. And what they didn't tell those ag folks down there is, now, not in the ag business, but I would imagine depreciation schedules are kind of important to the ag groups. They're looking at that going, yeah, we're gonna want those depreciation schedules. So how are you gonna cut that out? There's just that big, beautiful bill conformity issue is gonna be a football to get bounced around. But I can tell you right now, this governor's like, I support it. You want to change it? Good luck.
What about other states? What is the feeling from other conservative states like Idaho? Are they not conforming as well? Or are you?
There's gonna be similar discussions, like Texas is a big state where the hit to their budget is, I think, threefold what Idaho's expected hit is, and they're gonna be faced with the same
They're
question.
gonna complain. They're gonna complain. They're gonna complain. We gotta do something. They're gonna pass it. And they're gonna say, we're gonna come back next year and try to fix it. Because what they don't want is they don't want the Trump tweet. It's election year. And that's what everybody's like, I don't need Donald Trump tweeting, saying something terrible about me and right in the middle of my campaign, especially this legislature. I mean, they're scared to death. I mean, they watched that school choice issue last year. We worked the school choice issue. We had the votes on Friday. We had an 18-17 vote to defeat school choice. I was working for this school boards. On Saturday morning, he tweeted. And I knew at that point, I read that tweet and I went, oh, we just lost 3 votes. And we lost 3 votes. We lost 4 because the pro tem went with him. He called and told me, he's like, oh, I'm turning on the other side. But that's what happens. I mean, that's the impact in something like that. But, he goes out and tweets, anybody that wants to vote against this tax cut should be defeated. No, they just don't want that. And, seems to me that he doesn't have a problem doing that. That's it kind of from the waterfront. Sorry, there wasn't.
So rosy and bright. Everybody's like, all right. I'm gonna go
Sorry, there
change my
wasn't such,
picture to get
I
home.
was sorry there wasn't
Yeah.
brighter, there wasn't brighter news. But just the realities of it.
Great. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, you guys.
Right. Clearwater, Brent?
Let me get some contextual numbers behind all of that.
Yeah, right.
I thought bond managers were pessimistic.
Relatively speaking, we're here with the happy.
Actually. Not so much, but. Okay. So I'm gonna leave the portfolio to the end, kind of at a high level. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. We can kind of go into the numbers of income it's generating, performance, and composition. But first, I like to start with kind of a summary of major events that have been happening in the last quarter, because it kind of paints a picture of the overall risk sentiment that we're seeing in the markets. And so obviously in the news, you all saw the government shut down, record 43 days. Started to see kind of pressure building in food aid, airline disruptions, and a number of different things that kind of over time gradually moved people to get it resolved. I think the important thing to remember is we could be right where we were on January 30th again, because most of the functions of government are only funded through that date. There were 3 functions that had a year-long funding. And so we could see a whole nother debate about, the health insurance premiums, kind of all that stuff get wrapped up in there. But overall, the government is reopened and we're starting to kind of get those wheels churning. It takes a little bit of time. I think the biggest thing from our perspective and from the Fed's perspective, which are the next 2 bullets, is data was missing, the official government data. Obviously, there's a lot of data that people kind of rely on around the edges from private sources when those aren't being reported. But we just got a jobs number this morning, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then the October number is being kind of deferred until in December, after the next Fed meeting. And so obviously there's always the Fed quarterly that we're talking about, especially kind of the political dynamic that we've been dealing with since the administration took over. But overall, I think the important thing here is that, and you'll see this in the next slide, or 2 slides away when we talk about the Fed's rate outlook, is that there was an outlook in the markets for more rate cuts 3 into the end of the year. And then we've started to see yields move higher in the last month or so, because Powell came out and basically said we're far from certain on a December rate cut. So, and you've seen kind of trickles here and there of Fed officials kind of echoing that sentiment. And there are a few doves and some people, they're all over on the spectrum, but you're starting to see some people kind of temper expectations for a December rate cut. And really, you kind of have to look beyond that as well, which we'll talk about. And then the other thing is we've had moments of risk off sentiment. I would say that overall over the course of the year, it's been risk on. You've seen equity markets. I'm sure, all of you look at your retirement accounts and brokerage accounts, and it's been pretty good. A lot of that is AI driven. And more recently, within the last month, we've seen what I call AI exhaustion, could call it skepticism, people rethinking what the multiples on a lot of those companies are, the kind of circular nature of the investments. And you've seen more recently the cost of insuring against defaulting in some of those companies increasing. And so those are usually indicators of risk off sentiment around the industry. But then also we had a little bit of a China tariff flare up that backed off. A lot of these things, they kind of flare up momentarily and then they back off. And that's kind of what we've been seeing. There's been nothing that's been persistent and significant or material, but we are seeing overall general risk off sentiment. All these things and how it impacts this portfolio, it's not really that bad because you're in government securities, you're in treasuries and agencies, very safe. Usually these types of scenarios overall generally lead to falling yields, which are helpful for your positions. And so, it's just kind of interesting to understand where the sentiment is overall. But this kind of shows we got a lot more of the yield decline earlier in the quarter. Powell spoke at Jackson Hole, which he does in August. And then they had another meeting in September where he started to talk about the downside risk to the jobs market, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then more recently, they've been backing off of that and you've been seeing yields rise. But on balance, about 40 to 30 basis points down and less so out the curve. This is part of kind of what is leading to these movements. People are kind of thinking about the December meeting. They're thinking about what is the Fed funds going to be in 2026? How many more cuts does the Fed have in it? Right now, we're in that 3.75 to 4% range. The market was, as you can see by this chart, which is the probability of a 25 basis point Fed rate cut at the December 10th meeting. And earlier this month, it was 70-ish% probability. We've been a little bit higher than that at certain points, but this really backed off over the course of those more hawkish Fed comments. We're today, I think, at like a 40 or in between 40 and 30% probability. And so really, it's an interesting note what the December meeting could be. But really looking forward, there is a lot of difference between what the market's expecting next year and what the Fed's guiding to. The Fed has less of a rate cut outlook. I think they probably are about 50 basis points more of cuts after December. And the market's looking more at 75 to 100 basis points next year. And that has converged a little bit because we've been without data. And then they've been relying a lot more on these hawkish comments, but also some of these private data points, which you'll see in a second. On that rate outlook, there is a case to be made for fewer rate cuts, but it is dependent on a lot of things that may or may not materialize. And I have some of the counterpoints in 26 here listed. One is that consumers have been more resilient over time. They're less levered, and I have a slide to kind of show kind of why that is the case and how that case could be supported. They've kind of been moving along. It's been less consumer spending or just kind of slowing down similar to jobs. But if you don't have a significant decline in jobs, the jobs market really taking a hit, consumers are in a pretty good spot overall. You also have the tax cut implementation kind of taking place next year. You've had discussions of this 2000 tariff dividend, which, I don't think there's any way that could ever be passed by the legislature, but it's out there in discussion. There's very remote possibility it happens. And then obviously the AI sentiment, there's a lot of skepticism around it, but there's still activity. There's some case that you could continue to see CapEx. You could continue to see that supporting the jobs market as well. Even if they're cutting jobs, you could see productivity increase. And so those are just some kind of wild card things I have out there for 26 to support a higher for longer case. But really, this is where most of the focus has been. We've been in a low hire and low fire environment. And you see, obviously, 21, 22, those were crazy jobs years post-COVID. And we've, as you might expect, kind of gradually declined. But really, since the administration took over in February, you've seen it really fall off a cliff, especially after tariff implementation. This is not official government data. So this is a different private source that people have been relying on as the government's been shut down. And I think it's also helpful just to look at in conjunction with the federal government's numbers, just to kind of know things are kind of jiving. And you do see that that's the case. And then you also see the layoffs chart, rate, which this is from the JOLTS report, and it's kind of in that 1 or 110 area. It's been pretty stable. And so, overall, you have to be a little cautious in this world because it's just a fragile environment. If the economy downturns, as we can hear, sentiment is negative on that. You could start to see layoffs pick up, and just smaller changes in layoffs gradually over time could put a dent in some of this. And so that is the downside risk to yields that the Fed's kind of cognizant of at times, and we'll kind of see how that develops. And then the other kind of side of the Fed's mandate is inflation. And overall, even with all of the kind of commentary around tariffs and the fears early on of the highest of the tariff rate, and that's obviously deals have been made, things have been carved out and excluded. We've had a lot of decompression in the tariff discussion, and we haven't yet seen inflation. Inflation's been sticky. It has been for a while. we haven't really seen a material pickup. There have been some indications that it is rising, especially in certain tariff sectors. Housing is not necessarily one of those yet, but so a chart like this where you're looking at ISM services prices paid, which is just one component of an activity index that they look at in the economy, and how it relates to CPI inflation on a 3-month lag basis, is it's had a very consistent historical relationship, and you've seen that prices paid component rise pretty materially to 70. CPI, as you can see, has been rising. Whether the magnitude of increase you see is material enough to move the Fed, really what this just would mean for the Fed likely is that they go on hold for a longer period of time. You see some yield increase just to converge with what those expectations are. So I would just say the upside risk to inflation from our perspective versus the downside risk to employment, we kind of focus on the employment side at this point. But this is still a notable development why the Fed's kind of creating some caution around the rate outlook. And then finally, I mentioned the consumer resilience. We've kind of heard this over the last few years. We're expecting consumer spending to start trailing off at some point, and they've really just kind of powered through, even though you have student loan payments coming back on, all of the COVID stimulus kind of fading out of that system and being spent. And you do hear a tale of two economies, which is the lowest end is stress, and you do see that in delinquency and charge-off rates in certain credit sectors. But on the other side of that, where most of the spending is happening in the upper income segments, has really held things together. And when you look at this, which is the total credit to private non-financial sectors, so just take out the banks and financial companies and look at households and non-financial businesses, continue deleveraging over time. So you see obviously the buildup to the great financial crisis, delevering post great financial crisis, and continuation of that trend post COVID. That puts them overall in a pretty good situation to continue servicing debt, to continue taking on debt, even though in nominal terms we hear about debt rising. That could turn fast if jobs fall. So that's the cautionary note there. But it is an interesting dynamic for consumers that we're tracking. So those are just some things that have happened this quarter and how it impacted portfolio and yields overall. Any questions on markets before I go into the portfolio briefly?
Like things about it. I mean, obviously AI has been beaten to death, but I'm just curious what's that doing to the market? AI.
Sorry, what was that?
AI.
AI. Yeah.
For labor markets, I mean, it seems like it could be a two-sided coin in that way, where it's going to save some money, but also cut jobs.
Yeah, I mean, Brett might have more on this. He's a tech guru on the portfolio management team. I don't know.
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It could go both ways. It's supposedly it could reduce your employment costs if you have a lot of employees. If you're the type of business that has a ton of employees who do the type of tasks that AI might be able to do someday, you're very interested because you could save a ton of money. So then where do those people go work? Some of them will get reemployed. Whenever there's a new technology, everybody fears it'll take your job. Well, some people will just get employed using that new technology. But it could mean a long, protracted, difficult transition period to find ways to employ everybody. And so, yes, there will be some major winners, people who save costs. But the real story is, whether these people producing this AI, spending all the money on these chips, spending all the money on developing these models, will they ever see some return? Who's going to pay them the millions and billions of dollars for them to see the return on inventing this stuff? And that's where we're struggling to see where do those end dollars come from. You and me might spend $20 a month on a premium version of ChatGPT if it really helps our lives, but we would need everybody literally on the planet to spend 10 times that or more to justify some of these numbers that are being spent right now. So we don't see it as a situation that's going to keep going the same direction forever. There's going to have to be some consolidation. Model comes out, a cheaper version comes out, something's going to have to change. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, just like when the internet was in a bubble, we will still be in a place where now it's a part of our lives. Now AI is a bigger deal than it ever was. We don't know which companies survived along that path, but it's here to stay and it will only grow, but it'll be a bumpy road.
So in terms of the portfolio, looks really small, I apologize. But, you know, this is a snapshot as of the 17th. And then any time that I'm talking, that it mentions income, I guess it says there since the July review. But overall, not a lot of change in the portfolio. We had a 2-month period during this quarter where we didn't even have a maturity. And so from a performance perspective, which you'll see in a moment, I've kind of talked about this in the past, you kind of have moments of trailing and exceeding your benchmark. And so, you know, if you're trailing the benchmark on duration and yields fall, it does create a little bit of underperformance. But the most important thing for this portfolio, and we always say this, is the income generation. And, you know, the book yield at 4.12, it's obviously as we reinvest at lower yields, as yields continue to move lower, that's going to kind of trickle lower. You're further out the curve and have exposure in that 3 to 4, 4 to 5 year space. Those yields are going to hold in for a while and help keep that income elevated for some period of time. But that's generating at current levels an annualized 1.3 million on the portfolio. And so again, from an income perspective, that's really good. And you know, we'll take higher yields for longer as long as we can. But you know, overall, you still have an unrealized gain in the portfolio embedded in there of 148,000. So a lot of those positions do have gains. We talked about this in the past. We have obviously, you know, a longer runway likely with one, you know, leading up to a project that would need funding and other funding sources that could be used for that. But if the portfolio needed to be tapped, there are embedded gains in there to take. And then overall, it's a high quality portfolio. We're still similar composition to the past, about 65% treasuries, agencies, and then around 6-7% Idaho munis right now. And you know, there just hasn't been many large taxable muni issuances that we've partaken. We did have a couple of smaller 150, 250,000 that we got participated in. But large, and we got a $3 million deposit that you all deposited. We put that to work in the 2 to 3 year space, and that's kind of that bucket where we would be putting new money to work. And then on the margins, again, it's helpful to kind of close duration gaps with the benchmark. But on the margins, 4 and 5 year space are not something we're shying away from given that rate outlook right now. So, you know, it's doing exactly as it.
Just a note for the board under those durations there, as we look at projects, so like Boise Center East, I think we started looking at that project in 2013, 2016, finished in late 2016, 2017. So with those duration amounts, 50% being in the 1 to 3 year, I feel like that's a good, but if we start identifying potential projects, moving that to the front end would probably be our best interest.
And then this is just a performance number, which I mentioned, you know, this is a buy and hold portfolio. So some of this just goes with kind of the ebbs and flows of the portfolio, which you see in that quarter to date number. But yeah, since inception, it's you know, around 420. We're tracking that kind of that level on a 12-month basis. So.
That's per year. So
Yeah, it's an annualized number. Any questions about the portfolio?
Just to follow up on just what Cody mentioned, just want to clarify that even if we're invested in 4 and 5 year, whatever it is, securities or whatever kind it is, again, they can always be sold. So there's no, you know, there's no magic to it. So you don't have to absolutely be sort of timing your length of your securities. It's not like they're not
penalties to selling those early though, aren't there? Or
yeah, it depends. You know, they kind of just ebb and flow with the market. So that it's possible that they are in an unrealized loss of position. So you would have to realize that loss if you wanted to tap that. And there's likely other parts of the curve we could tap instead if you didn't want to do that.
So if you do a bond,
doesn't restrict us from access.
Yeah, and if you do a bondage at some point, you know, there'll be the smart bond people who are figuring out, you know, what we invest. Let's say you did a $60 million bond issue, you're going to get that money, and then you're going to be investing in things as well. So you'll want those smart people to be working with these smart people to figure out how you're doing whatever magic it is you all do. So
yeah.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thanks.
We have
Marketing.
sales and communications.
What?
You sure?
Get their chair.
Good, Madam Chair, members of the board. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you every year about marketing, sales, and communications. We have slides.
They're getting uploaded up here. There we go.
Every year, we traditionally present you a nice document. It's been bound, it's printed, it's in color, it's got pretty pictures. And this year, we're not distributing that. We are putting pause on that particular plan because we don't want to rinse and repeat. We actually are going to go through a new process. So we're kind of pausing on just presenting something in November for you to evaluate and view. And mainly this is the reason is we are pivoting. We're going in a new direction. We have actually hired a new agency. And so so today we'll learn some technology and we will talk about our new marketing creative strategy agency. We will talk about our plan overview. So we're going to give you an overview. We've still created a document, but what we're going to be doing is working with our new agency to help us make sure that we're on track and uncover anything that we may not have touched. Recently, we've gone through the RFP process and we received 12 proposals from different agencies, 9 local and 3 from out of state. We identified through a scoring process, the top 5 agencies, and we started to interview with the top 3. We felt if we couldn't find something in the top 3, then we would interview number 4 and number 5. In that top 3 process, we did find an agency that we are excited to be able to work with, and their name is Mitchell Palmer. They are a great agency, presented a fantastic proposal, have some great rates. That will work within our budgets that have already been approved. So we're not coming back for more money at this point. But we're excited about what they did present and how they operate and how much of their team is local. And so we'll be able to have some great connection with them. The interesting bullet point that's not on this slide is the fact that they are also the agency for Visit Boise. They also work with the state of Idaho. So there are some collaboration efforts that we will be able to absorb and to benefit from because of their working with the 3 different groups. We will have a separate campaign. We are not looking for them to, oh yeah, let's just mirror what Visit Boise is doing. We'll just ride their coattails. We will have a very separate and distinct creative and print ads and digital ads. But there will be some shared efforts when we get down to the website and kind of planning the new website. So Mary Michael will hopefully touch base on that. So they'll be able to help every aspect of what we're doing. In December, we'll start the onboarding process. Their contract is a December 1 new fiscal year contract. So we will basically have a deep dive. We'll sit with them, we'll research, we'll show them what we've done in the past. We'll tour the facility. We will look at past creative. We'll look at past media buys. We'll be looking at everything and really, if need be, turn over that apple cart and start maybe selling something else different that may not be available to us at this particular point in time. At that point in time, once they have all this research, then they'll come back to us with some campaign strategies. They'll look at our marketing plan and help us make sure that we're on track, make recommendations, make maybe some room for improvement, and then we'll present that plan in the early spring. And during the first quarter, we anticipate having a document that we can present to you and say, this is our roadmap. It may change, but this is the direction we're going. With the fulfilling of the plan, we'll identify those adjustments, we'll consolidate goals, and we'll differentiate from ourselves from other destinations as well. The one thing in the new plan too, Mary Michael and I are combining our sections. It's traditionally been marketing, sales, and communications as 3 separate plans within the document. There are so many overlaps and there's so many things that are repeated. We have the same audiences, we have a lot of the same goals and messaging. And so basically we're going to consolidate the document and to make it really streamlined as much as possible. So in the marketing section, and we're each going to take just a couple of seconds to talk about our plans. This is just going to be a transitional year for us. We really, with the new agency, we're going to look at new creative. We're going to try to learn from what we've done in the past, maybe test and have them ask questions of us of why we're doing what we're doing. And maybe they can say, yes, that's good. Yes, that's not so good. Or let's spend our monies elsewhere. So we're really looking for input to be able to adapt and change and come up with some strategies and campaigns that really are different, unique, and special to Boise Center. Our priorities are always going to remain the same. We're looking for eyes and ears. We want to promote our message. We want to increase our awareness, and we really want to help that turn into future bookings. The information, the awareness process is important to Allie's job and to her team to be able to get the phone to ring, to be able to get people to fill out forms on the website, those kind of things, to get those leads, to get the conversation started. We're really looking forward to our new agency, and so we're really looking forward to their recommendations, especially having them critique our old plan from 25. That'll kind of be the foundation. Take our 26 plan of what we're proposing that it will be, and kind of just help us along that route. And we're excited about the opportunity to launch some new creative. And we saw great creative amongst all the agencies that promote that shared creative. We are lucky to have some great agencies and great services in this community. And then we will continue with our sponsorships. We have quite a few sponsorships throughout the year that we do with Boise Metro Chamber, with Visit Boise, with the Idaho Business Review. We have a new one with Boise Dev, and of course the Big Sky that we do on an annual basis. Those will continue as a part of our plan to help support the events that are coming in here into the building. So not a lot of differences in that, but we might see a lot of differences when it comes to media placement and how we're doing our media strategy and how we're messaging. And so that's probably going to be the thing that will be interesting to see the outcomes of those conversations.
But does Mitchell Palmer work with any other convention centers?
Not, from what I can remember, not specific convention centers. And I can share this with you if you'd like to see their proposal. It's great because they do share quite a few facilities as well as destinations. So they do fit the puzzle piece of what we were looking for.
But they don't represent Spokane?
No.
Okay.
One of the agencies, I can't remember which one, did at one time have some relationship with Visit Spokane, but I can't remember which of the 12 it was.
Some of them had a couple of facilities that were kind of event facility.
Well, good afternoon. I won't belabor. Thanks, Cliff, for that great description. I did want to give you a brief recap of a couple of our key areas heading into next year, but we had a successful year with our digital media campaign. This is Boise Center's owned earned branded digital campaign. Our digital media was the largest generator of traffic to the website. Our page views and time on the site all improved this year. Our impressions from the ads also increased. I can tell you that the KPIs, our ad conversions or website lead submittals rose 25% over the prior year, which is substantial for us. We took advantage of changing our native and display ads to premium placements, what are considered, so you get more targeting options. We launched a new Google demand gen ad, a display ad, which you can take advantage of some of the best targeting available, and also natives, more premium placement for our native. All of this led to increased impressions and more website event inquiry submittals. Next year, what we'll be doing is really working with Mitchell Palmer, and this will happen pretty quickly, to improve our website and improve the digital media strategy using AI SEO and really adding SEO. We've had SEO and search engine marketing input, search engine media in place for years. We're going to add the AIEO, excuse me. I always say gonna start singing the alphabet.
E-I-E-I-O is what-
Yeah, that's exactly where I went.
I always think I'm making it up when I say that, but I'm not. And there's a strategy to this, and the way that people search for destinations, they search for travel, we search in general, is really morphing and changing. And right now, we're not as appearing as high in those rankings as we could be. And we're going to change that quickly in the first 2 quarters of the year and start incorporating more tools to be what they call digitally discoverable. So if I put a ChatGPT in it or prompt it and I say, show me the top 15 convention centers in the West, the art to getting into that search is having the keyword rich content on your site, being populating your site with earned media that's talking about your destination or your convention center, as like Smart Meetings, best conference center in the West, and Meetings Today, best convention center. All of those things go into feed that AI. For lack of better words, it's a hungry animal, like that Pac-Man. It just wants to eat all this content rich with keywords, and it's gonna hopefully rank us higher and make us appear in more searches, especially in searches where we're not ranking. In our SEO audit last year, we saw that we were weak compared to Salt Lake, weak compared to a couple convention centers in California, but it's all about getting that keyword rich content, some other things. So we will also, we have a separate budget set aside as a capital budget because it's large to rebuild and design this site. We will continue to do this. We need to get it on a 5-year cycle. I now understand that going through ours currently is about 8 years old. It's hitting its lifespan to where the technology no longer becomes supportable, and because people have moved on to next gen. So we'll redevelop, design this new site, but I'm mentioning to the board, it's something we'll come back probably in 5 years and take a look at. We don't have to entirely rebuild, but we'll need to put some money into the infrastructure to keep it going. The new site as well, we're going to work with the sales and event team closely because there's better interactive tools for them now for not only to search documents, like if somebody wants to find the donated alcohol, there's an AI component we can put on the site to make it really easy for people to find floor plans and find special permits for having fireworks inside the building and so forth. So more to come on that. So thank you for trusting us with the marketing budget. Thanks to Sophie for being part of our marketing committee and for helping us go through. She was right there with us when we interviewed the 3 marketing and creative agencies. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Allie.
Okay, well, all this awareness and marketing is going to drive those leads, and that's up to sales and our collaborative efforts with Visit Boise and our hotel partners to close business. So our plan remains, fairly similar from the prior year. We're really focused on bringing in those room night generating events that grow our economic impact and of course revenue for the building. So some of the things that we're going to be executing next year in market events, those are always really important for us to bring in the clients and actually see our building and our destination. For all the marketing and the communication and awareness that we do, Boise still is one of those places that is just kind of largely sort of unknown. People are interested in discovering it, and we can say how fabulous our downtown is, how safe and clean it is, but really getting them here is really what closes the deal. So we've got 4 main in-market events happening in Boise next year. The Treefort FAM in March, of course, with happening with Treefort. And we have a call with the third-party company tomorrow afternoon to talk through those details and hopefully bring a team of about 10 of them in the spring. Smart Meetings, Cody mentioned, is a big deal. This is a show that we have been going to for several years. It's an appointment-based show, 60 planners. So this is going to be the largest sort of industry event that we've brought in. This will be our 3rd. We're kind of in this rotation of about every other year, bringing in one of these industry type events. And last one was in 2024 with Meetings Today Live. Summer FAM, we're looking at that for sometime between June, July, or August. And that's really led by Visit Boise, although we'll participate with, usually it's a hosted dinner at our building and a site tour. And then the customer advisory board This has been a really great group, very informative for the center and for the CVB. That would take place in September. Another thing we're just going to continue to look at is really the ADR, the average daily rate, and the demand on hotels. Next year is going to be interesting just because we have the new AC Element opening. That's going to bring in close to 300 more rooms to inventory. And that's going to definitely have an impact on occupancy. So we have some recent data that was prepared by Tourism Economics and STR. This was a report that Visit Boise commissioned. What it's showing us is that hotel revenue is projected to increase about 2.8% in 2026. And really that's supported by a slight acceleration in demand as well as ADR. What we are going to see is a softening in occupancy. And so I think that's going to lead to a little bit more appetite for those group blocks, group business, which we've already really seen a little bit of a turn in some of these larger citywides that were closing for 26, 27, and 28. So I anticipate we'll see more of that, which is great news for the building and for bringing in conventions. Also our sales tools, of course, we have our rebates. Right now we have our two main rebates is the room night and food and beverage model, which is really based on performance of room night pickup and food and beverage spend with the building. And that can earn a client up to a 50% discount on their facility rental. And then the newer one is really focused on our in-house spend. So a combination of food and beverage and technical services, which is AV and IT. And a group can earn up to a 100% offset of the facility rental based on a higher spend. We also like to focus, of course, on our competitive pricing. When you compare Boise and the convention centers in particular to other facilities or convention hotels, we're really quite a deal for especially the national conventions that travel around the country. And another thing that kind of sets us apart is really our one point of contact. A lot of other facilities, you're going to have an event manager, you're going to have to talk to another department and contact for catering because it's a outside contracted service. Same goes with IT and AV. And so it really lends itself to a streamlined planning process for an event planner working here with Boise Center. Finally, strategy, and this really kind of feeds into the new collaboration with Mitchell Palmer. There's going to be a lot of talk about, what's our ideal event profile, what works well in Boise Center and the destination. And Cody mentioned this earlier, kind of that like 600 to 800 person event really makes a big splash in our city and our building right now. And really that's made up of, for us, mostly association or corporate business, those market segments that do really well here. Education has been one of our top performers for many years, agriculture, environmental, tech, health, and medical. And so we're going to be feeding all this information to Mitchell Palmer, and they'll help, make sure we're targeted in our audiences. We're going to continue, of course, with focusing on pattern and layering events, really to maximize utilization of the building. Dark days mean no revenue for the building. And so really our job is just to make sure we're being strategic in where we're booking all of our events. And then finally, we're trying out a couple new shows next year, hopefully with the board and your strategic vision. If we have some new things that we can talk about, we'll be in front of different audiences as far as like what's our space look like maybe in the future years. And so we'll also be looking at continued collaboration with potentially like another destination, Madison, that worked really well this year. Kind of lets our money and our efforts go a little bit further just because we can reach more people if you have more suppliers in the room. Planners tend to be a little bit more interested in that additional networking opportunity. And then also looking at a potential booth refresh. This is our booth that we use alongside Visit Boise at ASCE and IMEX. Sales goals for next year. So you can see here again, we're based on future booked revenue, room nights, and economic impact. So that's tied to the contracts that we close inside fiscal year 2026. What these numbers translate to is a 15% increase in our revenue goal. As Cody mentioned, we did hit our revenue goal for FY25, and so we're bumping that up for next year. and a 10% increase in room nights and revenue goals. Based on kind of what we're seeing, our current pipeline that we're working in, a lot of these groups can take months, a couple years to close. And so, we've sort of earmarked some groups that we think we will close with a contract in 2026, but the delta that we're trying to make up translates to about 30 new pieces of business coming into that pipeline and closing in the year. And then 2026 projections. This is what we are anticipating to actually take place inside of FY26 in our building. Cody mentioned, we've had a little bit of normalization in 2025. We knew that was coming, especially as we compared it to 2024. So a bit of stabilization, but what we're seeing in 26 is kind of like another ramp up. So we're really optimistic of the momentum that is currently on our calendar. Future forecasted room nights are ahead of pace for the next 3 years, 26, 27, and 28. And what's really encouraging is the room night pipeline is also pacing ahead of prior years. I will say the attendance figure is quite high compared to prior years, and that's really largely driven by 2 festivals hitting FY26. We also have Sensi coming in the summer. They were just here doing a planning visit yesterday. 3,000 people, maybe upwards of 4,000 people for that event in July. And then consumer shows have been seeing really great attendance between Boise Flower and Garden Show. We have Boise Public Library Comic Arts consumer show that's in August. And so really great attendance, which is going to bump up that economic impact from Boise Center events next year. And that's with that. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Question, Sophie, did you want to give your, take on process for the plan?
Yeah, thank you. I want to give a huge amount of credit to the team for structuring an RFP, jumping through all of the hoops that's required to look inward and reflect on a really big transition, like Cliff mentioned. It's one thing to hire a contractor or specialist who can be executional in nature, right? Making changes to your website or crafting some creative. It's a big transition to go into someone who is strategic in nature and looking at the broad picture across marketing, comms, and sales to say, I know what you're doing, but what could we be doing better or differently? What's coming down the road? And Cliff was very nice at not mentioning, I was the one who asked to hold off on a plan, because if we're bringing in a new agency who is tasked with thinking strategically, whether it's AI coming down the road or looking at audiences with a more critical lens, not having a plan that we give them to say, we want you to execute this. We want their talents to look at it and say, let's find the areas that we could do differently. I think the other benefit, we thought very critically about pros and cons for an agency who also works with Visit Boise, because we want there not to be duplication. And Mitchell Palmer was thoughtful in their presentation, showing how alignment doesn't necessarily have to be leveraging the same creative and using the same talking points about Boise, but just having line of sight to where placements are going to be made and not cannibalizing our own results or charging ourselves more because Visit Boise and Boise Center are going after the same audiences, and making sure that we're really maximizing our funds because of that. So I'm excited to see what comes up with, and I think our other big goal is to take what has been a 35-page plan and streamlining it down to something that can be visual and exciting with clear KPIs for the entire team, whether it's the 3 people who are in this room, but their broader teams as well, to make sure that everyone is facing toward a North Star.
Thank you for your efforts on that. I appreciate it. Did you have a question? I know you kind of had a thought.
And Ali, you said the revenue goal for fiscal year 26 was bumped by 15%, right? What was the bump the year before? Because you mentioned it, but I don't know.
We actually, I think we were a little bit more conservative, if I'm remembering correctly, going into 2025, just because we saw a little bit of a slowdown happening. But I have to get back to you and what that trajectory.
But it's more aggressive than the year before.
I would agree,
Yes.
yes.
You beat this last year by 119%, right?
Yes,
17.2 to
That's correct. That's
18.9.
correct,
yeah, that sounds right.
But the future booked business supports that increase of the 15%.
Yeah, and
know.
part of that is, we don't want to just sandbag, but we're looking at what are we currently working on right now that we think will support that goal? And there are some significant ones in there. I mean, Porsche Club of America for 2027 is in there. That's a larger economic impact generator for sure, room night generator. Sensi, we're still working through some, negotiations, but that's nearing. So that could very well hit 2026. But yeah, so there are a couple that are in there that are close or we are optimistic about. And so that does support a little bit of a more aggressive revenue goal.
And kind of through the mixed messaging that we're hearing from the economic side, we keep hearing kind of possible downturn, and we're seeing in 26. And compared to even my counterparts in other markets, that's a little bit of an anomaly we're seeing as far as the continued trajectory upward at that level. So I'm trying to be conservative, but also just painting the picture as to what we actually see for you guys, and not putting the team over a barrel in that sense as far as.
So you're seeing your counterparts in other cities are not seeing the same increases
Same
in
level of
26?
increases, yeah, a little bit more leveling off happening. Again, I think that's the efforts of the team getting the quality of business. And again, some of these are just timing and Sensi and things like that really are bumping some of those numbers up, so.
Is that other markets that are similar amenities and in size, or is it bigger markets?
There's some bigger market, some of them similar size and some of them bigger markets. So like Maiden Bower is one of them, and Bellevue, that's a little bit similar size, but they have some very weird anomalies like Boeing and Microsoft in their backyard. So.
Is that a trend that we could track as we're thinking about opportunities for future, where it's, I don't know, 100,000 square foot expo spaces and how they're doing as trends go forward?
Yes, I think that's a resource that IAVM could probably help with. I think getting them to respond. And what I'm noticing is we had just recently had a utilization data survey report that came out. And I flagged this with IAVM because I filled it out, but then I started talking to my counterparts that filled it out, and we started kind of comparing actually at the board meeting at IAVM side by side of what our filters were, and the way people were filtering event days, move-in days was a little different. And so I worry a little bit on, unless we get a consistency in a system-wide filtering, for lack of a better word, everybody looks at the dice and the apple up a little bit differently. And so it doesn't always feel like you're getting an apples to apples, and that was a terrible example with the dice and the apple, but it doesn't feel like sometimes you're getting apples and oranges against each other, but you can usually start to glean where they're at from a tracking as far as utilization and just up or down. So I think that would be information that would be very helpful as far as exhibit hall spaces or buildings that have those exhibit hall spaces, how that they're doing.
I'd be curious about that, even just quarterly or every 6 months, to get a temperature gauge on, obviously repercussions, like I was talking about, take a while to go into effect and then have consequences and a rippling effect. So I'd just be curious to take a peek at that every once in a while.
I think another key part of that, if we're going to go down that road, would be looking at not only utilization, but revenue generation, because a lot of them will give away the space to a consumer show to get the people into the building as utilization goes up. So, yeah.
That's a great point.
Great. Anything else?
Just again, I recognize the team's efforts in the RFP process. I would just echo the value of having Sophie on the committee. Was outstanding, and I learned more than I could have ever thought from just sitting through the process. I think me and Ali both were kind of enamored by the amount of experience we had around us from these types of opportunities, and looking at it from a new fresh set of eyes. It was very. I'm big on we've been doing this for 20 years, or I've been doing this for 20 years at this facility. And so sometimes it's kind of a, hey, this is what the marketing plan, it comes out at this time, we do it this way. So she challenged our kind of status quo, which I really appreciated. And I think it makes a ton of sense rather than wait a whole nother year to really get them involved and get their hands wrapped around the plan, because it's already been formed. We get to get their fingerprints in it earlier and start working with them side by side. So great feedback.
Thanks.
It'll be exciting to
Thank
see.
you.
Okay. See no other business before the board. The meeting's adjourned.